Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining with us from around the world. I'm Paula Dobriansky. I'm Vice Chair of the Scowcroft Centers for Strategy and Security with the Atlantic Council. And I'm tuning in, by the way, from Dubai. The Atlantic Council has a program here in Dubai. And I'm very, very excited about today's program. Welcome to this Atlantic Council front page event featuring the presidents of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The Atlantic Council's front page is the Atlantic Council's premier live ideas platform, spotlighting global leaders who are innovating and championing constructive solutions to current global challenges. And this edition in particular is hosted by the Scowcroft Center's Transatlantic Security Initiative. Russia's unprovoked war in Ukraine has upended the European security order and has resulted in the largest war in Europe since 1945. Now, for some in the West and in the United States, Russia's invasion came unexpectedly. However, the three Baltic states, owing to their location and shared history of occupation by Russia and the Soviet Union, have long been vocal in sounding the alarm about Putin's aggressive intentions. And it is partly this shared history and understanding that led the Baltic states to join NATO 18 years ago today, enhancing their security as part of the North Atlantic Alliance. Since 2004, all three Baltic states have been model allies, investing heavily in their defense capabilities, and especially since Russia's first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, advocating for the alliance to do more to prepare to face the challenge posed by Moscow. Since 2016, they have also each hosted multinational NATO-enhanced forward-present battle groups, bolstering deterrence in the Baltic Sea region. Now, however, as tensions between the alliance and Russia reach heights not seen in decades, the Baltic states are in a critical position on the alliance's eastern flank. The alliance has responded by taking measures to enhance its defense and deterrence posture in the near term, while setting the stage for additional long-term moves to enhance collective defense. Ensuring that the Baltic states remain safe and secure should be paramount for NATO planners as the alliance moves to reinforce the guarantee it made to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania 18 years ago. I am truly not only excited, but honored today to welcome the presidents of all three Baltic republics to the Council's stage. Let me introduce, we have President Alar Karis of Estonia, President Egils Levits of Latvia, and President Gitanis Nausėda of Lithuania. Now, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today for this important discussion about what more NATO should do and about the future security of Europe. A housekeeping note before we begin: if anyone in our audience online would like to join the conversation, please enter your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, or tweet them using the hashtag #ACFrontPage. So with that, I'd like to begin with the three of you and ask a question that I'd like to hear from each of you consecutively, a broad but important question. And that is today, 18 years after joining the Transatlantic Alliance, and with the fact that Russia is waging a war in Ukraine and Europe, how do you assess your own country's security? May I begin with you, President Kades of Estonia. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. So it's my pleasure to be taking part of this meeting. Yes, it has been extremely important for all Baltic states to join NATO, because there was no alternative at the time, and there is no alternative at the moment. And we all understand that pretty well. And even 28 years ago, one of our presidents, Lennart Meri, whose birthday is today, already warned about threat from Russia and mentioned also Ukraine. And at that meeting, which was held in Hamburg, actually President Putin was present, but he left the room because of his comments our president made at the time. So there is no alternative, and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania are members of the NATO and stay members of NATO.
Forgive me, President Kades, thank you so much for that. Let me now go to Latvia's president, His Excellency President Egils Levits. The floor is yours, sir.
Morning in America, good afternoon, Europe. For Latvia, like for Estonia, there is no alternative to NATO, because NATO is the most powerful defense alliance in the world. And if we are looking on NATO on one side and to Russia on the other side, then we can see that NATO is many times more powerful military, politically, economically as Russia. What is decisive is the political will to defend the territory of each NATO member state, and this political will was constantly demonstrated last week by the extraordinary summit of the leaders of NATO states. It was repeated, and also President Biden repeated several times. Also, we rely on NATO, and because we are members of NATO, we are safe, like other member states, not only, of course, the Baltics, but Germany and Italy and Poland. We are members of the most powerful defense alliance in the world, and this is a basis of our security, basis for European security, and basis for transatlantic security.
Thank you so much. And President Nausėda of Lithuania, the floor is yours. We'd like to hear your comments, sir.
To be honest, we have a contradicting feeling. On the one hand, we feel secure. On the other hand, of course, we remain vulnerable. Secure because we are members of NATO. And as you mentioned, already 18 years. We managed to become the member of NATO since only 11 years since the last Russian soldier left the soil of Lithuania. So it was very narrow window of opportunity to become the member of NATO and enjoy full-fledged security within this organization. But on the other hand, we see what is happening around us, and we see what already happened in Moldova, in Georgia, and now it's happening in Ukraine. So the threats are there. We are aware of the extremely aggressional behavior of Vladimir Putin. So this is the reason to act, and not only discuss, but also to act in order to ensure and to improve our security system. This is very important that we are under the umbrella of Article 5 but we need also very clear actions, and I see those actions happening. And I am looking forward to the futures NATO summit in Madrid, which will set, I think, very clear perspective on the security of eastern flank of NATO. And we, from our side, we will do our homework. And this homework is just to increase our defense spending, to improve our infrastructure, and to do everything in order to become the very good host nation for the troops coming. I think those are the measures we can implement in the short run, and of course to talk about and to think and to plan about the issues which are of middle and long-term nature.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me go, if I can, start with you and then go to the other two presidents. Let me build on what you just said. You know that recently there was the extraordinary NATO summit. In fact, it was held last week. What do you view as the key outcomes from that summit, and were you reassured by the NATO summit that took place? President Nalseda, if I may begin that question with you.
Thank you very much. I am really happy to see that the last extraordinary NATO summit was very fruitful. And I think the most important message we delivered was the, first of all, military assistance and further military assistance to Ukraine, which is very timely and which is crucially needed in order to help our Ukrainian friends to resist and to fight for their independence, for their freedom, but at the same time for our freedom. And another topic which is extremely important for me as a president of the Baltic country, one of the Baltic countries, is strengthening of the eastern flank of NATO. And we are facing very serious threat because from the one side, we have a border with Kaliningrad region. From the other side, we have border with Belarus, which is already swallowed by Russia into the military system of Russian Federation. And it changes our military calculus dramatically. And I see that NATO allies are aware of this factor, of this development. And I think we all agreed that the time of deterrence or tripwire is over, and we have to talk about forward defense. We have to talk about deployment of additional troops on the soil of Baltic countries in order to feel safe. And this is extremely important, not only to us politicians, but also to our population.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also know the Polish president has certainly spoken to this issue as well. Let me go, if I may, to President Karas. Would you please comment on your view on the outcome and the key results of the extraordinary NATO summit? How do you see it, and specifically with regard to Estonia?
I guess the most important is that these extraordinary summits actually existing. That means there have been already two of them, and we are kind of preparatory to summit in Madrid. And as my colleague from Lithuania already told, it's important to have permanent presence of NATO forces in Baltic states, and not only in Baltic states, but the whole eastern flank. So I think this should be the most important outcome of Madrid summit. So, and of course, there are several proposals were made by different leaders of the country, and also because in our country, Prime Minister is taking part of these NATO meetings, and also different proposals, and hopefully this will be discussed also in Madrid summit, how to help Ukraine and how to what to do with this money we actually provide after buying gas or oil.
Right, thank you. President Levits, same question, if I may. I think our audience is keenly interested in hearing each of your individual perspectives.
I am very satisfied with the result of the extraordinary summit of NATO leaders last week. As my colleagues already said, there were two main outcomes. The first is the decision to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. This is countries from Estonia through Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. So these countries in the eastern flank of NATO, there should be deployed more US troops and the military personnel from other NATO countries. It was already decided to double the number of the NATO's multinational battle groups. We have till now 4 in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, and now 4 additional more in Slovakia, in Hungary, in Romania, in Bulgaria. So this is one outcome already. In the next months, this new additional battle groups will be organized. The other thing is that it was also the principal decision to deploy more troops also to the Baltic region, to Poland, to all this NATO flank, so that this would be a very strong signal to Moscow that we are ready to defend the territory of NATO. And our strategy is deterrence and defense. And defense capacity means military personnel, military equipment. So defense capacity is a tool in order to deter Russia. This is a very important thing. So because Russia is not provoked by the strength, but by the weakness of the NATO. Because when we are weak as NATO, then of course it is an invitation to Moscow to intimidate the NATO states. And only when Moscow sees that NATO is strong, military strong, then of course it is a guarantee for peace in Europe. So this was the one outcome of the summit.
All right.
And of course, the second one, so we will strengthen our help to Ukraine because, as already my colleague said, Ukraine is fighting not only for their own independence, for their own sovereignty, but also for our European and Western values. And we are obliged to support Ukraine in military, politically, economically. And
thank you for
I can
that.
also add that this summit last week, we have adopted also a roadmap for the decisive summit in 2.5 months, end of June in Madrid. But this was a preparation in principle for the summit where the concrete decisions would be made.
Thank you, President Levits, and forgive me, I jumped in because your volume went down and I thought it was the end of your sentence, but glad you completed it. So thank you for that. Let me ask a question, and this time, if I may begin with you, in fact, President Levits. And then if President Noceda and Karas want to also answer this or have a different perspective, please jump in. We'll take it in different ways with each of you. You know, there's been a real focus, President Levits, on the issue of that Russia potentially could use chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Would this constitute, in your view, a red line, to use that term? And if so, if a tactical nuclear weapon is used or chemical weapons, do you recommend that NATO intervene in some way? What would you say to that? President Levits, please.
Yes, we all agree, all NATO member states, that the use of nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons against Ukraine that would change the situation completely. And we would answer as a NATO member states, and this answer would be very strong. I cannot say which kind of answer, because we should not announce this answer in advance so that Russia can calculate with that. But it would be a very, very strong answer, and Russia would not be happy with this answer.
All right, and let me ask, would either of the other presidents like to add anything to my question? I see President Noseda, you seem like you want to add something. Please, go ahead.
In recent weeks, Russia already crossed so many red lines, and I think it would be extremely and dramatic cross of red line, and the use of chemical and biological weapons would mean that Russia is breaking all the rules which have any relation to civilized world. So I think the actions and the response of NATO should be very decisive, and we should not reject, there should not be taboos. And I think all the measures which could make the price of this usage of biological and even tactical nuclear weapons, the price for this action should be huge for Russia. And I think we should use all the measures, including military ones, in order to stop Russia from this behavior.
All right, thank you for that. President Kadis, anything to add on this one? Or?
Well, it's difficult to add anything because most of it's said. But just to remind you that we are NATO members, but we're also our partners, Finland and Sweden, which are also thinking and talking about this red line and crossing red line. So shouldn't not forget that they also have some plans to join NATO at some point.
That's quite true. There's been quite a bit said about what Sweden and Finland would do. Thank you for adding that. May I, with you, President Kadis, ask a question that also has been out there, and I think our audience would certainly be interested in your perspective, and that's this question of off-ramps. By the way, first, maybe let me even ask bluntly, should there be an off-ramp here for Putin? And what do you think if, yes, what do you think would actually convince Putin to halt his bloody campaign and massacre in Ukraine? What should be NATO's desired end state?
We should go into this trap, but we start talking about what to do and what to give to Putin to end this war. Of course, we have to end this war, that's for sure, but not in any price or any case. So that's important to remember. And all these talks which are going on at the moment, I had a discussion this morning with our Russian ambassador to Estonia, who gave me the credentials, and we had this discussion. And I asked it, what about these talks in Turkey at the moment? And he said quite clearly that, well, I don't think there is going to be any result out of that talks. And he also mentioned that this war is going on and on. It's not going to end soon. So this is what the ambassador told to me. So I would be very cautious with this kind of different talks on, behind the scene.
Right, thank you. I want to get each of your perspectives on this one, if you want some to add. And then we have quite a few questions coming in, and even related to this question I've just asked. But is there anything you want to say further on my question, President Levits or Noseda? Go ahead, yes, President Levits, please.
I would add to that what President Kadis said, that it is up to Ukraine to decide on that. But I see that the end of the conflict would be only then if the territorial integrity of Ukraine will be restored. And this would lead to a peace which is stable. Any other solution will not end the conflict, and then we will have an ongoing conflict here in Europe. Also, Russia should go back, and Russia should stop the violation of international peace order or of international law, and this would be the end of the war, end of the conflict.
Right, President Nauseda?
The best way to stop Vladimir Putin is just to do everything that the war for Russia, the war in Ukraine, is unsuccessful. And so far we see that Ukrainians are defending their freedom very successfully. And it was not included into calculations of Russian Federation that war continues for several weeks or even months. The estimations were very optimistic, 1-4 days and the war is over. This is not the case, and this is very good. And also we have to talk about the impact of our sanctions we already imposed on Russia. I am talking not only about the sanctions of European Union, but United States, Canada, other like-minded countries. Yes, they were decisive enough, but so far they have only limited macroeconomic impact on Russia. I think we have to talk about strengthening of those sanctions. If we talk about SWIFT or the cut from the SWIFT system, we have to talk about the ban of all banks and not only selective banks. If we talk about the boycott of different strategic materials coming from Russia, we have to talk about oil, about natural gas, about coal, about nuclear fuel. So only in this case we can achieve even more significant impact on Russian economy. So it goes not only to the Russian oligarchs, but also middle class of Russian Federation will start to feel the implications of the sanctions. And one more important thing is to close the loopholes of our sanction systems, because right now we see that still there are many possibilities to avoid our sanctions with the help of some countries of the world which try to assist Russia, namely China.
All right, thank you. I want to come back to President Kadis. There was actually a question that came up in response to your comment about Sweden and Finland. And let me just share it. It was, what is your perspective on the thinking and potential role of NATO partners, Sweden and Finland, in addressing security and challenges in the Baltic Sea region? What would be your expectation on their role?
I mean, Finland and Sweden have been very, very good partners with NATO. We have many military exercises together. We share information, intelligent information, and so forth. So that's why these days there is a very, very strong discussion about these countries joining NATO, because from Finland, the support from public support was a couple of months ago only 23%. Now it's 62%. And there is discussion in the parliament to join NATO or not to join NATO. The same with the Swedes. So the window is quite short also for Finland and Sweden. But yes, we have been a very good partners and continue to do so, whether they are NATO members or not.
All right, thank you. I'm going to take some of the questions that have come in, and let me do it this way. I'm going to put it out there, and then some of you may want to answer and maybe not, and we will move on, because there's a lot to discuss with you. And again, we're very privileged to have you on. You know, President Nauseda, I'm going to start with you on this because you mentioned energy. A question came in from Paul Swenson about how dependent, in fact, is your country on oil and gas from Russia, and what actions are currently being taken to reduce that dependency. And in fact, Mark Zashin also asked how each of your countries will or will not respond to your energy needs in light of the war in Ukraine. So let's start with you, President Noceda.
Thank you very much for this very good question. And I would like to say that we already were taking necessary actions about 10 years ago. For example, a very long time, Lithuania paid a very high political price for natural gas coming through the pipelines from Russia. And we decided to establish liquid gas terminal almost a decade ago. And now we are really resilient to the possible blackmail from Russia regarding this issue, because we can satisfy our needs and we can cover our demand on natural gas by importing liquid gas from various countries, also including United States. And this was a very important step in strengthening our resilience and strengthening our energy independence. Our company, the largest oil refinery in Mažeikiai, decided to stop to buy crude oil from Russia recently. And they have substituted it with the import from other countries, not Russia. Only one possible element or a risky element is our electricity. Electricity system is still connected to the so-called BREL, or former Soviet Union BREL system. Now we are doing necessary steps in order to synchronize our electricity grid with continental Europe. It takes time. It was envisaged to finish until 2025. We are keen to speed up this process and maybe complete this process even earlier. So more or less, I would say, generally speaking, Lithuania is even more resilient to energy blackmailing from Russia than many other countries of Western Europe.
All right, thank you. President Levits and Karis, would you like to add something about your own respective countries? President Levits?
Our view is similar. There are alternatives. In Latvia, we are importing Russian gas, but it is possible also to import by buying LNG, and there are LNG terminals not far away from Latvia, and we can use this gas. Of course, the expenses will be higher, but this has a costs for the energy independence, which is very important to keep our political independence.
Right,
Yeah, in Estonia, we're quite in a similar situation. We are also planning actually to build an LNG terminal in Estonia, and as well as windmill plants, offshore plants, together with our Latvian colleagues. But Estonia is in a slightly different situation as far as energy is concerned, because we got oil shale, which is not very environmentally friendly, but we can really have our own electricity out of this oil shale. And there are also plans to build nuclear plants. At least there's a discussion to build a nuclear plant, but it takes probably 20 or more years from now. So basically the same situation, LNG terminals and offshore plants together with Latvia.
Let me pose the question from Hans Binnendijk. He's asked a security question, and this follows on. All of you have talked about the forward deployment, forward defense. What level of NATO and US military presence in your countries do you think is necessary? Who would like to speak first?
Well, I can start. I mean, first of all, the leadership for the United States has been very exceptional till now already, and we really accomplished. The US has done allied unity than ever. So, and I think and I hope it will continue. So the presence of also US forces as well as other NATO forces are of paramount importance in coming years or in coming dozens of years even. So this is a very short answer to this question.
All right, President Levins, I saw you raised your hand.
I think we should move from so-called tripwire concept to the forward defense concept. That means in our countries, there should be enough military personnel in order to keep the territory in case of a Russian attack. And that means that more troops from other NATO countries should be deployed here in the eastern flank, not only in the Baltics, of course, but also in all eastern flank countries. I think this are the necessary steps in order to fulfill the task and the mission of NATO to keep the member states safe.
Right. President Noceda, you want to comment on that? And may I inject one more, if you
Yes,
don't mind?
of course. Forward
This is
defense is
Go ahead.
key.
Go ahead.
Forward defense is key element of our security, and we already have very positive decisions in all Baltic countries. I am talking first of all about the leader countries of Eastern enhanced forward presence. In Estonia, this is Great Britain. In Latvia, this is Canada. In Lithuania, this is Germany. And Germany decided to send additional troops to Lithuania in order to strengthen the military presence here. We also have the same decision taken by United States government, and we have additional military personnel here since I think February. Additional troops, additional military equipment, because the strengthening of military posture is not. This is not only about the personnel. This means military equipment also, and what is even more important, we have to switch from air policing regime to a missile and air defense regime. So far, this is not the case, and we have to do everything in our hands in order to assure that all Baltic countries are protected by air defense regime. And looking to the longer perspective, or looking forward, of course, it's very important to turn or to transform military battle groups, battalions, into the military brigades in the future. And I think this is the issue we already discussed in Brussels. We will discuss in Madrid, and I hope very much that there will be decisions taken which will guarantee that Baltic countries will be protected by military brigades here.
Right, thank you. President Noceda, this one is a question for you. It's from Jack Krupansky. He asks, there has been a lot of discussion of the vulnerability of the Suwałki Gap, where the Polish-Lithuanian border is sandwiched between Kaliningrad and Belarus. Are you confident that NATO has the right contingency plans to fully deter or respond to a Russian attempt to create a corridor to Kaliningrad at the Suwałki Gap?
Yes, this is a very good question, and I have to tell that we are very concerned. All the time we were concerned about Suwałki Gap or defense of Suwałki Gap in case of possible military intervention. But after the recent developments, first of all in Belarus and now in Ukraine, we are even more aware of this risk, of this threat, and we try to achieve very fast and concrete results in the discussions with our NATO allies and with our friend, with our partner country, Poland too. Yes, I welcome very much the recent decisions to send additional troops to Poland, but Lithuania's position is that we have to defend Suwałki Gap also from other side of the gap, from soil of Lithuania. So this is the reason why I think we have to pay more attention to this issue, because if our adversaries will cut Suwałki Gap, they will cut the entire region of Baltic countries from reinforcement, from the NATO allies coming. And this is very important to assure that Russians are, or adversaries are not able to use this strategic advantage, and we are ready to react to it.
Right. I would like to ask this question, and it's not from the audience. Let me inject this because it is one that comes up, and it's for President Karas and Levits. Thinking about the Russian-speaking population that you do have in your respective countries, how have your respective countries been working to counter Kremlin narratives and disinformation among that population? Could you please share that with us?
I mean, Estonia has been working very hard to improve the inclusion of Russian speakers in our society, and this is a very diverse group with very different and diverse opinions. But we have since 2014 we have made a progress, and a recent survey said that 73% say they feel a sense of belonging in Estonian society. Of course, they have a lot of influence from Russian side, from TV, from different radio channels, which are full of propaganda. So what we did in Estonia, we allocated more money to our Estonian channel, which are already also in Russian language, and also private channels. So we have more and more programs, and we have seen already that Russian-speaking community are more and more watching our TV to get the proper information rather than information from Russian side. And we also, what we did, we closed down quite a number of propaganda channels and made free some of international channels like France 24 and Euronews in Russian, so that they can watch and listen to these channels. And of course, depends on the age, because younger people, they are more West-oriented and take information also from social media. Of course, there is also fake news and misinformation. But yes, the older generation is still watching or did watch Kremlin propaganda channels. So we are improving, and it's getting better and better. And I have seen it already myself.
Right. Thank you, President Levits.
Yeah. Generally speaking, it is not a very important issue because the vast majority of the Latvian population are Western oriented, and we can see, for example, by the polls that over 90% of the Latvians are for Ukraine and only 2% for Russia in this war. It's very important numbers. So concerning the Russian-speaking population, this is a little bit different. A big part is disoriented, and a smaller part is oriented to West, and even a smaller part to Russia. But if we are looking to this Russian-oriented minority in the minority, then we can see the big difference between the older generation, which are rather Russian-oriented, and the younger generation. Over 80% of the younger generations in the age 20-25 are oriented to the West. That means it's a question of generations. And I think in general, this small minority within the minority plays, for the moment, not a very important role.
Great, thank you. Let me ask a question now from Ian Brzezinski. It's two-part, but it's interrelated. He indicates as we address the immediate security challenges created by Russia's unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, we must also strengthen the economic strength and resilience of Central and Eastern Europe. And the two-part question is, what role should the Three Seas initiative, which is very familiar to you, a regional effort to accelerate the development, cross-border energy and transport infrastructure, play in this effort? And with Ukraine on track to join the EU, should the Three Seas initiative deepen its relationship with Ukraine? May I go to President Karas? I'm going to go to you first. I know that Estonia has been a host of Three Seas. Would you take this on first, please?
I think it's Three Seas is very important issue in sense that we get connection between south and north, which is not present at the moment. Different kind of connections. So that's why it's utmost important to have this kind of initiative. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, of course, we also proposed that Ukraine should be a member, at least give an opportunity to become a member of European Union. And European Council members agreed with that, and now it's a kind of green light to start these kind of negotiations, because Ukraine does belong to Europe, and this is the path they themselves decided to take. It's a long path, we know it from our past, but we should give a green light that this door is open for Ukrainian people and Ukraine.
President Nauseda or Levits, any comment on this, or should we go to a new question?
Yeah.
Three Seas initiative is very important, and of course Lithuania understands very well the role of Three Seas initiative, and we recently became the part or the member of investment fund contributing our financial resources to this project. It increases, first of all, connectivity within the Eastern and Central Europe. And if we are talking about the connectivity, it means also very important projects we are in the process. First of all, Rail Baltica, Via Baltica. It increases, by the way, military mobility too, and this is crucial and directly important to our military or military security. And let us not forget about the projects, infrastructure projects, increasing our energy resilience. I already mentioned about the synchronization project with continental Europe. I would like to mention also the gas interconnections between Poland and Lithuania. All these infrastructure projects are extremely important in order to improve our resilience of the whole region. And of course, as rightly mentioned, it will improve our macroeconomic situation too.
Thank you. President Levits, I saw you wanted to say something.
Add to that the Three Seas initiative is in the same time political initiative and business initiative. So concerning infrastructure projects and businesses, my colleagues already said, but concerning a political dimension, it is also very important that we are 12 member states of the European Union in the central and eastern part of Europe. And there is a certain coincidence to the NATO eastern flank countries. And it is very important that we consulting each other also in political matters, but also to keep and to stress the transatlantic link between this part of Europe and United States and Canada. Because we are in business matters economically and also we are a region of growth in Europe because the yearly growth in economic terms is much more higher in our region as in the western part of Europe. And it is also from strategic interest for the United States. The next summit of the heads of states of 3Cs initiative will be organized in June in Riga, in Latvia, and also there would be a participation, a high-level participation from the United States, from Great Britain, from other countries, so that this region would become more visible and more important in European environment, in European connections.
Well, that's very good to hear. Thank you for all of your comments. I mentioned at the outset, I'm in Dubai for the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Forum, and 3Cs is certainly an important initiative, and there's a real focus on it, and thank you for your support hearing that. I want to go to Stephen Schinkel's question. He asks if under what conditions, if any, would you see establishing a no-fly zone over entire Ukraine or parts of Ukraine? For example, just the Western Ukraine, and basically would it be helpful to set that up to help minimize the humanitarian suffering and the refugee flow? And by the way, there was also an added question. I'm going to link it here from Randy Miller. He asks if the war goes on for a lengthy period, how will your countries integrate some of the Ukrainian refugees? Who would like to take that on first?
Yeah, I would say that concerning no-fly zones, it is in the first place up to the member states of NATO which are able to execute these no-fly zones, which has the military means to do it. Although Latvia has no such means, but we are for keeping all options open. It is the decision today not to establish this no-fly zones, but we are considering each day, each week, the situation, and this decision could be changed. Because the situation develops, and also we should adapt our response to the situation, so that we should keep all options open.
I would like to say that my colleague very good remark regarding this open-mindedness of the Baltic states. I think we have to keep all alternatives open, but we have to create, if we would like to create some non-fly zone or other systems, they must be credible. If they will be not credible, then of course they will not be effective. And they should not provoke the escalation of military conflict. So I can imagine that we could discuss selective non-fly zones, especially near to the very sensitive objects like nuclear power plants. For example, 30 kilometers around the nuclear power plants, and probably the international atomic energy agents should be more actively engaged in this issue. But for us, all alternatives, all options are open, and we are ready to discuss all of them with our allies in NATO.
President, yes, please go ahead. I was going to ask you.
I will comment the second part of the question, because I completely agree with my colleague said about non-flying zone. So yes, the worst thing what can happen is a frozen conflict. That means the people who are refugees now, they can't go back to the country, and they are basically have to live for quite a while in different countries. And we see already that millions and millions of refugees are leaving country, and also stay in small countries like the Republic of Moldova. There are more than 120,000 refugees already. We got 22,000 refugees. So that means they have to be integrated to the school system, kindergartens, and so forth. And I guess all Baltic states, and Estonia included, we work very hard on that issue to have the shelter to these people, to have integrated a school system, to Estonian school system, maybe to have also have Ukrainian schools and so forth. So this is something we should work on, and that they start the school year in September, like it is in Estonia.
President Keres, let me just begin with you. We're going to do one last round. This is my final question to each of you. I want to begin with you, go to President Levits, and then end with President Nausėda. Let me ask the question. You were each close with President Zelensky. This is from Chris Skaluba. Each of you are close to President Zelensky. What advice would you give him with respect to the negotiations underway in Ankara? Should he agree to Ukrainian neutrality and give up the prospect of joining NATO? President Keres, let's begin with you, and anything final you'd like to say. We have 3 minutes of conclusion.
Understandably, it's Ukraine to decide, Zelensky to decide. But of course, the decision made now are under pressure. That means it's difficult to judge what's going to happen. But as I said earlier, I mean, sometimes war is better than this kind of peace, that you're under pressure, make some kind of decisions. And it's up to the Ukrainian people whether they want neutrality, whether they want to give away some part of the land and so forth. So it's not that easy question.
Right, President Levits.
Yes. I would not give advice to President Zelensky, but President Zelensky knows that he can give some compromises only when the Ukrainian nation will be agree on that. So, and he knows that. And I am sure that he will take a very prudent decision in the interest of Ukrainian nation. But it is really for the President Zelensky and for the Ukrainian government, for the Ukrainian nation to decide on that.
Thank you. President Nausėda, you have that question, but I have one last for you, please. One moment.
Thank you for this question. You know,
President
sorry.
Forgive me, sorry. There's a little delay. So please answer that question, but I have one last for you, and your colleagues can understand why. It's a question from the Atlantic Council President Fred Kemp. He also asked if you could answer the one about Zelensky, but could you also answer how does China factor into your security assessment? Given your own recent diplomatic row with China, is Lithuania concerned by the increasingly close relations between Beijing and Moscow? Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you know, yes, I have constant contact, touch with President Zelensky, and every time I have the conversation, I ask the same question: how I can assist you, how I can help you, my friend. And the answer is, please raise our issues, be our voice in different formats in European Union, in NATO. And I try to do my best in order to consolidate these efforts of our like-minded countries in European Union, and those are many issues. One of the issues is, for example, clearer European perspective for Ukraine. Other issues, military assistance. I think that we see very fundamental changes in the behavior of our allies. It was not possible to imagine that Germany would be ready to deliver the military weapons and also lethal weapons to Ukraine. Now this is reality. And yes, we are ready to provide all necessary assistance. And what else? there is no need. President Levits mentioned very correctly that there is no need to convince Ukrainians to fight for their freedom. They are decisive, they are brave, and probably I am absolutely sure that they will defend their freedom until the end of this war and until the victory. And now regarding the second question, yes, we have complicated relations with China because we used our sovereign right to establish the representative office of Taiwan in our country. We left the format 17+1 because we didn't see any promising results for our country. It made the relations with China quite complicated, but we will solve our problems. Now the main problem is that China keeps the distance from Russia and is not ready to collaborate with Russia in regard to the war in Ukraine. And I think this is still possible to achieve with diplomatic means and other political means that China would not support Russia. And this is very important. China could take the role and take the leadership in this issue, but staying outside of this conflict and supporting the democratic world.
President Kadis, President Levits, President Nauseda, thank you so much. It's been a privilege having you on the Atlantic Council's front page. You have really done what we say a tour de horizon, really have taken us through all of your policies. And again, we're most grateful for your time today and in admiration of how stalwart and strong your countries have been. You are important to our relationship. And again, we just appreciate greatly your time today. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.